warm welcome to all. My video today is titled The Central Concepts of Linguistics. In this video, I will cover the history of modern linguistics. I will begin with the history, and with that, the central concepts of linguistics. I've listed the more important concepts: structuralism, functionalism, and formalism, prescriptive and descriptive, langue and parole, synchrony and diachrony, signifier and signified, arbitrary and onomatopoeia, competence and performance, and I will finally go into the intradisciplinary areas of linguistics. Let's begin with the historical development. The history of linguistics dates back thousands of years from the 5th century, sorry. In this lecture, we will discuss the history of modern linguistics from the 20th century to present time. And there are three stages: the early, mid, and late 20th century. Looking at the early 20th century, this period saw the beginnings of structuralism. The scholar, a European Swiss linguist, Ferdinand de Saussure, in the 1910s, known as the father of modern linguistics, was responsible for a fundamental change of direction in linguistic study in the early 20th century. He brought about descriptivism. While prescriptivism was dominant in the 19th century, he introduced the descriptivism. He introduced a structuralism as an approach to language study. And with that, the term structural linguistics. What is the aim of structural linguistics? It is to describe and analyze elements of language and the relationships between language elements at the structural levels. So this is referred to as structural linguistics. This description and analysis of language system takes place as the language is used by the community of speakers. So according to how the speakers use the language, and that is how the analysis of the language is done and described as the language is used by the community. We need to understand the terms descriptivism and prescriptivism. Descriptivism is an approach to language that focuses on describing how language is actually used by its speakers without making any judgments about whether that usage is right or wrong. So language is seen as dynamic and evolving naturally based on the needs of its users. It studies actual patterns and variations of language as language is used in various contextual settings. Prescriptivism, on the other hand, focuses on correct ways of using language. So prescriptivism prescribes rules and standards for how language should be used based on historical conventions, perceived logic, and also how language is used by the elite group or the upper classes. So they set the standard, and the standard is how the language should be used. This is the approach of prescriptivism. So descriptivism and prescriptivism brought about two terms: descriptive linguistics and prescriptive linguistics. So descriptive linguistics will describe. Because of the word descriptive, the focus is on describing the rules of language use as the language is used by the community of users. Whereas prescriptive linguistics, based on the word prescriptive, will prescribe the rules of correctness and lay down what are the normative rules as to how language should be used. So the approaches are different. Since the beginning of the 20th century, linguistics has been critical of prescriptivism and has favored descriptivism. And de Saussure's structural linguistics is descriptive. Why is it descriptive? Because it describes the rules of language use as the language is practiced by its community of users. So de Saussure pioneered structuralism, and he changed the direction of linguistic study from prescriptivism towards descriptivism. So he's a pioneer in the field. The key concepts in structural linguistics are lung and parole, synchrony and diachrony, signifier and signified, and the relational nature of language. These key concepts were foundational to structural linguistics. We will explore each. What is lung? Lung refers to the abstract underlying system of rules and structures that constitute a language. So lung is actually collective knowledge of a language that exists in the minds of the community of speakers. This collective knowledge is shared among them. They know it. They learn it and they know it. De Saussure famously compared lung to the rules of chess. The rules of chess, for instance, how pieces move and how the game is won, exist independently of any particular chess game. So these rules are fixed and understood by all chess players. So this is what lung is, the rules of a language. And these rules are known by the community of speakers. Parole, on the other hand, refers to actual instances of language use by the speakers in real-world situations. So parole is the actual act of speaking and writing, the specific utterances and expressions that are used by people in real-world settings. So these utterances can be variable or can vary. For instance, the utterance, I'm going to the park, is parole. And variations of this utterance could be, I'm heading to the park or I'm making my way to the park. What is lung in this context? Lung is the rule. It is the rule for the use of the present continuous tense to refer to future action that is either happening now or is planned for the near future. So lung becomes the underlying structural rule. Following the chess analogy, parole would be the actual moves that are made in a particular game of chess. Each chess game is unique, so the moves differ. But even if the moves differ, the game itself must adhere to the underlying rules of the chess game for the game to be a valid game of chess. So the underlying rules are lung, but every move within a chess game is parole. This is the analogy used by de Saussure. Lung and parole laid the foundation for structural linguistics. That is, in understanding language as a structured system with underlying rules and relationships among the language elements as the language is used by a community of speakers. Now, the other concepts in structural linguistics are synchrony and diachrony. Synchrony, also known as synchronic linguistics, is the study of language at a specific point in time without having to consider its historical evolution. For instance, a study of the descriptive grammar of modern English. Let's say we have a study about descriptive grammar of modern English to analyze the rules of grammar as they are used today, meaning at a specific point in time. For instance, a synchronic study might examine the modern use of the verb to be and how this verb functions in sentences without having to examine its historical origins. So just doing a study about the verb to be and its functions at the current point in time would be a synchronic study. Another example is like a study of a dialect in a specific region. A study of how people in a certain state, for example, in Malaysia, there are 13 states. So if we focus on one region, meaning one state, and how are certain words pronounced and certain sentence structures made at the present moment, meaning now, without delving into how that particular dialect developed over time, would also be considered a synchronic study. So these are examples of synchronic linguistics. Language is studied at a specific point in time without having to consider its history. The opposite of synchrony is diachrony. So diachronic linguistics is the study of language change over time. So this is done over time and it can also be known as historical linguistics. For instance, looking at sound change. to trace how pronunciation has shifted over time. For instance, a diachronic study would analyze how vowels are pronounced differently over time. So, vowels, maybe focusing on a particular vowel and see how the pronunciation of that vowel has changed over time, maybe over a certain number of years, go into centuries as well. Or a study about syntactic change to examine how sentence structure has evolved. For instance, a study could look at the development of word order in English from the Old English period, which had a more flexible structure, to the modern subject, verb, object, SVO order. So how did that change take place? How did the sentence structure evolve? So these kind of studies are diachronic in nature. De Saussure argued for the synchronic study in understanding how language works. So in the early 20th century, he not only pioneered descriptivism, he also pioneered synchronic study. And synchronic study became a foundation to structural linguistics. He was responsible for the shift from diachronic study in the 19th century to synchronic study in the 20th century. So this was also a movement that he pioneered. Two other concepts within structural linguistics that are foundational to the approach is signifier and signified. So this major change was because of de Saussure's call for the primacy of the spoken word over the written word. Most linguistic study in the 19th century had been concerned with the written form of language, but de Saussure insisted on the study of the spoken form. And he came up with this model known as a linguistic sign. So according to de Saussure, a linguistic sign, what is it? He explains that a linguistic sign is the fundamental unit of language where meaning is derived between sound and a mental image or a mental idea. So meaning of a concept, meaning of a word or a concept, okay, it is derived between the sound of that meaning and what is the mental image of that meaning. So a linguistic sign has two parts that connect the sound with the mental idea. The two parts are called signifier and signified. Signifier is the sound, whereas signified is the mental idea or the meaning of a particular message or concept. Saussure's notion of linguistic sign shifted the focus from language as words to language as a system of signs, where meaning is derived from the relationship between sound, which is the signifier, and mental idea, which is signified. So this notion of linguistic sign is to put focus on the analysis of the spoken word rather than the written word. So there was a shift from writing, that means a shift from words to signs. So signs is what represents spoken word now. Look at this diagram. Okay, de Saussure gives us this picture, this mental image here of a plant. If a plant, a woody plant, he calls it tree. So tree, the sound or the sound pattern is called the signifier, tree. The mental image is the signified, which is the meaning, which is this woody tree or woody plant is a tree. So this is the meaning or the mental image in the mind. And the associated sound is tree. So this model of the linguistic sign, Okay, for words that meaning is derived between sound and a mental idea. Meaning is derived between sound, tree, the sound, and the mental image, the mental idea of this image. So this allowed for the analysis of the spoken word. De Saussure emphasizes that there is no natural link. So he further elaborates. He says that there is no link between the signifier and the signified. No link between the sound and the mental image, meaning that the relationship between them is arbitrary. No correspondence between the sound pattern and what the sound refers to. So between tree and the mental image of a woody plant, there's no connection between the two. The sound of a word does not dictate the meaning of the object it refers to. And likewise, from the object, meaning the mental image, we cannot predict the sound of what that object is called. Okay, so this is what it means by the relationship is arbitrary between the signifier and the signified. De Saussure gives us another example, but involving different languages this time. He gives us this image of this animal, and he says that this animal is called a dog in English, it is called hunt in German, and it is called chien in French. So do you see that the sound pattern is different for the same mental image? So this is another example to show that the connection between the signifier and the signified, that is the sound and the mental image, is an arbitrary relationship. Okay, there's no direct correspondence between them. The principle of arbitrariness states that the connection between sound and the meaning of what the sound refers to is by convention only. Okay, it's the notion that is that there is no direct correspondence between the meaning and the sound that refers to that particular mental image. However, in any language, there are a small number of expressions for which the principle of arbitrariness does not hold true, and this is referred to as onomatopoeia. Such expressions like boom or bang show that there is a partial correspondence between sound and meaning. For example, boom may refer to an explosion, and bang may refer to something that, like a gunshot or something that fell down and broke, So there is a partial correspondence between the sound and the meaning of the mental meaning that the sound refers to. So other expressions in English are like meow or moo or woof or tick-tock or drip. So based on the sound, we can guess the meaning of the sound. So onomatopoeia is actually an exception to the principle of arbitrariness. So this also exists in any language. Although the connection between signifier and signified is arbitrary, but there are some expressions in any language that go against the principle of arbitrariness. Okay, and those expressions are referred to as onomatopoeia. Now, what is the relational nature of language? Okay, this principle reveals that there exist relationships between elements of a language system. This we covered earlier on. Words, sounds, words, phrases, clauses, and sentences all have connections to one another. Okay, there are interrelationships. They are connected and linked. So in the structural linguistics, the aim is to analyze and to describe the structural elements and how they are connected to one another. That is what structural linguistics is, and the relational nature is a foundation to that approach to language. So, so up to here, we have covered lung and parole, synchrony and diachrony, signifier and signified, and the relational nature of language. These concepts are foundational to structural linguistics. They are introduced by de Saussure. Now we move to the mid-20th century. The important influence of structural linguistics into mid-20th century is still prominent and not disputed. However, there are two other linguistic schools of thought that emerged in the mid of 20th century, referred to as functionalism and formalism. Functionalism, also known as functional linguistics, emerged in 1930s and focused on the functions of language rather than structure. They focused on functions. Carl Buehler distinguishes three main functions of language. He says that language has an expressive function that allows speakers to express their attitudes, beliefs, and feelings. So expressions like, oh, I'm so tired. Oh, wow, that was amazing. Oh, I adore vanilla ice cream. These are examples of the expressive function of language. A representative function allows speakers to talk about the world, like to convey information or to state facts or to describe reality, like the meeting will begin at 10 a.m., or stating a fact like water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, or describing reality like macaw is a blue proton, and so on. Language also has an appellative function to influence or direct the behavior of the listener, like in making a request or issuing a command. For instance, can I have some salt? Or don't touch that. Or buy one, get one free, like in an advertising campaign. So this kind of buy one, get one free is actually trying to influence or persuade the consumer into purchasing a product. So this is how language has got functions, and this became the focus of functional linguistics. Then in the 1950s, we see generative linguistics, known as formalism, introduced by Noam Chomsky. This approach reveals that based on limited number of means, for instance, limited words and syntactic rules, speakers of the language can generate, thus the word generative linguistics, can generate an unlimited number of grammatical sentences. So this became the underlying or foundation for the emergence or the focus on syntax of or grammar of a language. Chomsky also distinguishes two concepts within formalism known as competence and performance. Competence is the knowledge we have of the language, whereas performance is the speech that we actually produce when using the language. So performance is using the language, producing the language, whereas competence is knowing the language. So these two terms were brought up within generative linguistics. Where is structuralism, functionalism, and formalism today in the 21st century? They exist side by side. So this diagram shows how they are actually exist today. Okay, in 2020, you can see the timeline here. They all exist side by side. So structuralism in the 1910s, it emerged, functionalism 1930s, and formalism 1950s, but they all are active and used in language studies currently. Then in the late 20th century to present time, we see the word interdisciplinary. This is now today an important word because linguistics has become increasingly diverse and interdisciplinary, where knowledge is integrated from more than one discipline, giving rise to interdisciplinary areas such as sociolinguistics. We see the integration of linguistics with sociology, psycholinguistics, linguistics and psychology, computational linguistics, linguistics and computer science. Applied linguistics, the use of linguistics to solve problems in the real world. Corpus linguistics, the use of linguistics as a methodology to analyze big data, and so forth. Okay, so up to here, the late 20th century, now we see the historical development of linguistics. Now let me go into the word intradisciplinary. Intradisciplinary focuses on integrating knowledge within a single discipline. So the word intra. So exploring connections and relationships between different concepts, theories, and methods within a specific field. So now within the single discipline of linguistics, we have areas within linguistics that focus on linguistics. For example, descriptive, prescriptive, structural, functional, generative, synchronic, and diachronic linguistics are areas or branches of linguistics within the discipline of linguistics. Okay, let me show you the diagram that I introduced in my earlier videos. So I'm highlighting here intradisciplinary areas. I've done the core areas, which are listed here. Interdisciplinary areas I've covered also in a previous video. Here I've covered through the historical development of linguistics. I have covered these concepts, and this is how we understand them to be areas or branches of study within the discipline of linguistics. Okay, and I've given examples also in earlier slides. Phonetics, phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, and pragmatics are core areas within linguistics that can be studied either in intradisciplinary studies or in interdisciplinary studies. Okay, so the core areas can be studied within intra or inter. And go back and look at my examples in the earlier slides. Let me make a conclusion. The history of modern linguistics shows that linguistics is dynamic. It's a dynamic field and ever evolving. Okay, it is characterized by cycles from early 20th century up to present time. We can see how philosophical inquiry has changed, empirical observation, and theoretical innovation. So from structural linguistics, early in the 20th century, we have grammarians meticulously describing text. Until present time, we have computational linguistics who try to teach machines to understand human speech through language programs and language models. So this is how the field has evolved from structural linguistics in the early 20th century to interdisciplinary linguistics in current time. Whatever it is, throughout time, we see that the history of linguistics evolves because basically it is the fascination with language that drives the field of linguistics. My references, these are the two that I use for this video. I would like to close now, and I want to thank you for staying with me till the end. Please like my video, subscribe to my channel, and make comments. Give me some feedback on my work, and I will pick up on your feedback and give me ideas on what you would like to get me to cover in subsequent videos. I will make videos according to what your queries are in linguistics. Thank you. Bye for now. Take care and keep safe.